Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on another edition of Arc Rex Temple of Ages, Part 13.2. Hello, everybody, wherever you are. I want to say hello, hi, good day, and my favorite, greetings, mortal beings. I'm glad you could join us on another edition of whatever the show is. Because once again, I'm still having trouble finding words to fully encompass, like, what is this? What am I talking about? We're getting a better idea of where it's going, yet I'm still having trouble putting it all together and kind of gestating it. And I kind of wanted to dive right in with this, that I got a comment recently, and I wanted to say thank you for that and the feedback. And that it's gotten me thinking a lot about what it means to save somebody, and not even saving somebody fully, because right off the bat that implies you're saving somebody's soul or their whole life, when it could be something small, like saving them time, money, stress, trouble. It could be so many things, and it got me thinking, where are we drawing the line here? Because especially with the broadness of humanity and my own life, it's so easy for somebody to it's basically a straw man argument. You pick something big and grandiose that's unreasonable, and you shut down the whole discussion just because of that. Like, oh, I can't save your whole life or soul, so we just have to worry about ourselves and not one another, when in moment-to-moment happenings, it could be so many other things that we're helping each other out with. And that I agree that in each of our own journeys, we have to play our own part in saving ourselves and finding that motivation even when nobody's around. Yet I think so much of the bigger picture and what I've been talking about is that we can help out each other's standard of living and quality of life along that journey. So if we can start solving each other's problems in a moral, healthy, systematic way, then we can start focusing on the bigger philosophical pictures. I always think of Maslow or Mavlov's pyramid of needs, and if you don't have food, shelter, security, and stableness, you have to focus on those things. Like a hunter-gatherer civilization has to spend so much time of its day-to-day living just making sure that it has food, shelter, and safety. And it's only when you have these things taken care of that you can really move on towards the bigger and better things and really think about those things. Because you need food, shelter, and security to be able to sit there and think about things. That's my prevailing opinion anyway, and that's been the goal of this whole channel from the very beginning. And if I want to help people spiritually if they ask, and they themselves are already on that journey and just looking for opinions and to talk about it and to reflect and things like that. Yet for the most part, I'm just focusing on the food and the shelter and just where people are going to be, in creating a space where people can bring their own dreams and philosophies and ideas, and we can all harmonize because we all have this bigger picture in mind and standard of living that we want to have, and agree on some basic ideas. And that here's talking about the great work, and I think worrying about yourself and your own journey and putting on your own oxygen mask is half the great work. And the other half is, if you can do that, then you should try, if possible, to go help put other people's masks on. Because in that analogy, if you put someone's oxygen mask on, in my opinion, that's not saving their soul. That's just giving them oxygen in that moment of chaos and craziness so that they can kind of calm themselves down and be grounded again and get back on their journey, because they were probably freaking out with all that oxygen. And that life, to be alive in the meat suit we are, has requirements. And that increasing chaos, it's harder to meet those requirements in a stable way, and especially in a long-term time scale, if you want to provide it to the children and people that haven't even been born yet. if that's your idea, those are thoughts that have been in my head for a while, and that if we're all connected and we're all one, and it all goes back to the same thing, then helping others is helping ourselves. And it's hard to do that if you haven't already helped yourself to the point where your cup can overflow into other people's lives. Yet, I think that's so much about so many spiritual teachings that we've heard over our lives about making things better for other people on their own spiritual journeys. Because if we take Jesus as an example, if he feeds 4,000 people with a few baskets of fish and bread, did that save their souls eternally? Or was that just another step along their path, and he was just helping them along that step along the way, and that wasn't the end of it? Same with casting out the legion of demons. Like, that guy probably still had to go work on his life in a spiritual way, and it wasn't all just sunshine and rainbows after that. That was just one chapter of his life, and he was lucky enough that Jesus could come along and cast out his generational demons so that he could move on and focus on other things along his journey. So, kind of taking that idea, I've been thinking a lot lately about where this channel's going, and those with me listening and being a part of it, because right now it's so simple. We're just making a video and a podcast and talking about these things that still seem so far away in so many ways. And it would be nice if it could stay like this in a way, yet I feel like it's going to keep evolving, and we're going to look back on these moments and these times almost like a sweet summer child. That if any of these things do really get traction and come to reality, then it's going to affect our day-to-day living, and that's the whole point of this channel, is to prepare against that so we can keep focusing on the things we want to focus on without chaos just kind of breaking through the door and disrupting things. So the first obvious route and thing that you could do on YouTube is set up a Patreon and a PayPal and all of those things, and try to go the traditional way. And I also love this Bernie Sanders meme, because way back when I was a Bernie Sanders delegate, before I really started this journey of information and, let's call it truth. Because, I'm still trying to figure out what's what. It's just, I feel like I've been lied to at every corner. And this was when I really first started seeing how corrupt the political system was. And I love this meme about him, because he's always doing that he's always promising all these things and asking for all this money, yet when it comes time to stand up for those good things he promised, he just kind of kowtows to the system and does what he's always done, and tries to placate it and just moves on, and everyone's money just went away. So, moving past that, because I feel like this channel, if I'm just relying on Patreon's algorithm and a few people on YouTube, and I'm grateful for the few people on YouTube and are with me, but this isn't even close to being able to provide even a minimum base of living, even if a lot of people did join a Patreon. And my point is, even if a bunch of people did join a Patreon, that's not really making the dream I want to bring to life come to life. It has to move beyond that. And I'm just asking myself, especially with the YouTube algorithm, what's the best way to go about this? Because I think naturally just organically letting it happen isn't the best way to go about this. And most of the progress I've gotten on this channel so far has been networking with others. And it's not all about the views to me, yet I do want to grow a little bigger so it can get a little further out there, because I do think it needs to be a little bit bigger than it is. And networking is the key to that. So I wanted to ask the people out here that if you can think of another channel that you have people, or if there's another channel that you know of that has a similar vibration, or that you think the people on there could use this information or might want to hear this message and think about it for themselves, then I would ask that you please let me know about that channel, or maybe let them know about me. Feel free to send links of this channel to anybody or somebody else so that we can maybe get the ball rolling. If you do believe in this dream and moving forward and taking steps away from this mainstream artificial system. And I would love to collaborate with people, making videos or podcasts or doing an interview where we talk about certain topics and try to bridge these different groups to form a slightly bigger group. Because I'm not talking about saving the world and everybody, but I'm talking about maybe connecting a little bit more than we have. And while we still have the tools of YouTube at our disposal, and we're still spending so much time on there listening to ideas, that maybe we can branch out as well. And if you think there's any good matches for those, please let me know. And that one does not simply make the dream work without the teamwork. And that this dream I have, I need other people. So I'm calling out through space and time right now to all people with a similar vibration. Assemble! And we too can form the dream team. And I kind of want to make a note right here that it's about the destination and the overarching idea of a peaceful society and living in a moral way with one another and being passionate and considerate and trying to meet these standards of living so we can have a better life together and not being a part of all this craziness. And that we can have different viewpoints and ideas as long as we can agree on these bigger issues and ideas, and we're not preying upon each other or trying to hurt each other in a sociopathic way. So it can be from any country, any religion, and it might be from people that used to be evil themselves and have chosen to turn over a new leaf. And it might have robots eventually. It'll be crazy. Yet I want to start forming this place for people with this vibration that want to see these moral dreams come true, and that even dreams and the impossible can come true. I'll keep giving this energy as long as I can. And it would be so much better if other people were there as well. Because one of the points in the Matrix was that Neo needed other people to believe in him as well before he could really start waking up and changing his part of the world for the better. So it'd be amazing if other people could help that vibration and this dream if you find yourself not vibing with your day-to-day life when you go to the grocery store or any of that, and just saying to yourself, wouldn't it be so amazing if there were someplace better that made sense and was moral and was built to withstand all this chaos? And that's the whole plan of this channel, moving forward anyway. And that I have thought about this idea for so long, and there's so many different parts I want to talk about and put in this presentation, yet I think there's a time and place for everything. And I'm having trouble getting past even the beginning. I was just thinking a few minutes ago, I'm not sure if anyone's actually fully said, I really like this idea and I want to be a part of it, even if we're just going to talk about it. That people will talk about certain topics in the presentation, yet overall, I'm not sure if I've had a person really come up to me and say, I've looked at the world and I think disaster-proof, self-sufficient living standards in a moral way is a good thing moving forward. That I don't think we're supposed to be a part of this system, and I don't want to keep going to the grocery store for the rest of my life just buying questionable meat in plastic containers when we could be coming together and forming moral answers and living standards in our own ways. And especially if things keep getting more expensive, that people are going to be locked out of their standards of living pretty soon. And I'm already going through that right now, and that's one of the reasons I'm making this channel and starting now. So hopefully it can start meeting the chaos and giving me more of a foundation of strength in my life. And I've talked about this earlier in World War II and Japanese prisoners of war being blown away by the standard of living of the average U.S. troop and the capacity of logistics that the Army had back then and what was possible. And that even is happening today, that this is someone from North Korea, and they're looking at the cooking procedures on this U.S. submarine, and she's just kind of blown away. Like, she doesn't even think it's possible that they have this bakery in a submarine underneath the water. Like, that's so far beyond what she's experienced. And she was in the submarine program in the North Korean nations, and she's looking at it and just blown away that you have soldiers doing their professional roles right next to a bakery in the spot you would least expect it, and how they were normally just given rice and basic fruits, and it was all canned, and it was kind of a luxury to even heat it up. So them having a full-blown bakery inside a submarine almost doesn't seem like it could be possible. And usually, like I was saying, they only get basic vegetables and fruits, and it usually lined up with harvest seasons and things like that. Yet, on the U.S. carrier, any day of the week, their standards of living are better than even the best buffet in her home country. And that was kind of the case in World War II as well, with the Japanese. And she was saying right here, if you have access to all this food, can you even call it a military life? And in her experience, they had to live entire months on this minimal quality of living, and they didn't even really have showers. So it sucked. Yet she's looking at our nation's standard of living, and it just blows that out of the water, that even thousands of feet underneath the water, they're getting hot showers and just this giant buffet of almost any food you could imagine, and that just helps them on their journey with this top-tier support system, helping them focus on their specialties and being professional, because now they don't have to worry about all those things and being smelly and stinky and hungry or having bad shelter. It just keeps adding up and up and up. And she's even talking here about how meals are such a cultural part of our lives and how they give us balance and peace and happiness. And how this standard of living changes the idea of even being a soldier, that the entire mindset changes. And on both sides of the fight as well, that if the enemy knows that they have such a standard of living, it affects their morale as well. And she was saying right here that this standard of living is so high that if you showed this video to people from her home country, they would say it's fake, or they wouldn't even believe you. And I was talking about this in a previous presentation, how in World War II, they had entire ships or parts of ships dedicated to just ice cream, and that they were giving these out to prisoners of war and soldiers. And this was a huge morale boost for the Americans. And the Japanese, like, it made them cry, and they almost couldn't believe that they had ice cream, something they couldn't even get in their home country during the war, really. And they were being given it as prisoners because the standard of living of the U.S. was so good during that time. And it was on the flip side as well. I think about this quote a lot, that there was a German officer that had a freshly captured cake that he got that was baked just days ago, and it had already crossed the Atlantic supply chain, or at least fast enough that it hadn't decayed yet. And he was just saying that, like, you can't win a fight against an enemy like that, because it's just so mind-boggling that they could even do that. And that's one of the reasons why we won. And back to this idea of mind-boggling logistics, because that's the idea of what Jesus did. He did these impossible logistics so his followers could be fed, and they could continue their spiritual journey here in duality and in the flesh. And I've talked about this show before called Gurren Lagann, and one of the main points of it is to do the impossible and see the invisible, touch the untouchable and break the unbreakable, and to rise against these oppressive forces in our world and make your dreams come true. And that show is about being in the mind of God, but that one day you can become as big as the mind of God and change the story and go through the hero's journey in a moral way and overcome all this enslavement we're in. I really like this meme right here. There's so much more room to breathe. And the whole point of this is building a room where we have a place to breathe without all this chaos being there all the time. And people can kind of find their peace and center again and be fed and happy and safe, even if revelation is happening outside. Sorry if I'm a bit tongue-twisted tonight. And that's back to the whole Plato's Titanic allegory I've been talking about lately. It's all about the standard of living and finding the truth in this crazy system with all these crazy things happening every day. And I kind of wanted to take a side tangent right here to talk about the placebo effect and a few other things about our reality, because when you add them all up, it starts to give away the system of how things work here, in my opinion, and how we have so much power to make our imaginations come to life, and how our very thoughts can affect this material world, and how that's being proved in mainstream science as well. So the placebo effect just blows me away, because you can have the effect of the treatment even though you didn't receive the treatment. So it's really hard to figure out where that begins and if it's magic or not, yet I see it as very magical, and it has a lot of power. That if you think something's going to work, then your body will respond to it even more because you thought it would work, and that your vision of what you thought was real and what was happening to you is actually very important in your day-to-day life. And I talk a lot about the observer effect because that relates itself back to how light behaves in our reality, or so they say how it behaves. And that when we observe light, it collapses from a wave into a particle. And before it could have been anything anywhere, but when we view it and it's observed, it becomes tangible and real. A lot like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did it actually ever fall? Because is it real if no one was there to actually observe it? And that's that whole idea. And here's a meme about how light is both a particle and a wave, and how in a way that doesn't make any sense, but when you really start applying it to everything else, it just fits right in there like a puzzle piece. And if you combine that with the double slit experiment, that reality itself is being shaped with what we're observing and where we're putting our focus and our attention and where the energy itself is flowing, and how viewing it changes the outcome. And that's a quantum effect as well, that when you observe a quantum particle, that it no longer can be in superposition anywhere, that it has to be in a specific spot. And when it does that, you're changing the natural environment from what it was. So you observing the system is changing the system itself and the outcome of it. And how it just creates this crazy fractal rabbit hole of who's observing who. It's kind of a mind bender. And I found a lot of these funny memes, and I wanted to put them one after the other. It all started with one meme, and it has the Ouroboros right there. And now I unironically think I'm a recursive self-awareness loop accidentally created by a simulated demiurge with a meme addiction. And right there's a becoming nobody, so it's related with the hero's journey in becoming a somebody from a nobody. And there's a very famous quote called "Turtles all the way down. Simulations containing simulations, which are also simulations," and how that combines with AI and artificial intelligence and the mind of God and everything we've been talking about. And the recursive revelation. What if I'm just a meme inside another meme? And then he's looking at the meme on his phone that's of him questioning if he's a meme. And then there's his creator saying, "Oh no, he's on to me." And it's just fractally spiraling into reality and time. And I love this meme right here that you have Zen masters and Gnostics, but you also have meme lords, which, hello everybody, if you haven't figured that out by now. I traveled the rabbit hole, and all I got was this existential meme crisis. And physicists discover a quantum effect where choices made in the present seem to alter events in the past. And this would be the idea of retrocausality, but also the idea of like Back to the Future as well, which I've talked about many times before. And there's this idea of the quantum eraser, which is basically the same idea of retrocausality throughout time. And it's just funny how they will say like, oh, we debunked that. How would you even begin? Anyway, and also just saying with that, it's hard for me to say for certain what is and isn't, yet it's just kind of a fun journey we're all on as we figure out if it's real or not. And it being revealed to us and all the secrets coming to light. And this quote right here, and what I was talking about in the last episode, what happens when you're not sure what's real anymore? Whether it be AI or robots or what have you. And Tim Dillon right here was talking about how we're going beyond parody itself, that you don't have to write jokes for reality anymore because it's already so silly and so chaotic that you don't need to satirize it anymore. Like, we're already at that point. And the whole point of this channel is that when you start reaching these levels of chaos and weirdness, that it's time to find your center and not lose your cool and find out where you want to go in this journey and how we can do that together, hopefully. That's at least what I want to do. And so right here we'll talk about the movie Noah, which is a lot of fun and connects a lot to what I think about on a day-to-day basis and part of this journey. And also Evan Almighty, which I've talked about, which is connected to Bruce Almighty and making your dreams come true, and how sometimes making your dreams come true is related to these cyclical cataclysms. So the movie starts out with the origin story of Genesis, and in the void they whispered, "Let there be light." And from there, the formless light began to take on substance and shape. And the waters of the world gathered together, and we have all this lightning bringing it to life, or this plasma bringing it to life, and the waters too teamed with life. And you can see here's the glowing blue plasma again, and that there were these great abyssal monsters that are no more. A lot like Cthulhu, like they aren't here right now, but what's cyclical will come back. And then man was made, and they were in the garden. And the snake, or choice, was introduced to it. And following the temptation of that, they ate the forbidden fruit. And from there, innocence was extinguished. And we all probably know that story and where it goes. And how chaos was introduced to this idyllic, perfect life that they had. And right here, it's one of the fallen angels talking about how they were created on the second day. And they watched over Adam and Eve and saw their fragility and their love and saw them fall. And when they fell, they decided to go down to earth as well and help out mankind. And right here, they're beings of pure light and plasma. Yet when they interact with the earth, they are encrusted with rock, so they can't fly or shapeshift anymore, that they're kind of stuck as these giant rock monsters. And even though they're giant rock monsters, they still help out humanity. Yet eventually, they're driven out by humanity. And this one guy with the fire sword, I believe it's Melchizedek, is the one that protects them. And basically, they're separated from mankind, so mankind's not living with the fallen anymore, and they're kind of just myth and legend and living off on this distant land that no one goes to anymore. And while they're there, all the fallen angels are begging to go home. And eventually they see Noah. They see Noah and they see Adam in him. And eventually they're not going to help him out. They're very salty about what's happened to the fallen. Yet all these trees and this water starts sprouting this barren desert from nothing. And they're all amazed at this miracle. And this river goes out all over the earth, and all the animals start following this river back to this forest that just popped out of nowhere. And in that forest, the fallen angels are helping Noah build the ark. And all the animals start showing up and going in the ark, or this self-contained area that's designed to shelter them from all this chaos so that they can reach this next part of the cycle in peace and restart reality. And how that also kind of relates to what I want to do eventually, and have these disaster-proof homes and greenhouses that have animals and whole ecosystems inside of them to weather the chaos. And it's kind of funny how now that we're trying to keep animals outside of all of these, yet the point of Noah and his ark and what I want to do further is keeping animals in. So it's just kind of funny how it flops back. And the animals aren't the only ones that show up. All the fallen humans show up as well that won't be allowed on the ark, and they're eating all these animals. And I also had a comment about eating animals is death. And I would agree with that, and I'm on my own journey to stop eating animal flesh. And, you know, it's step by step, day by day, but they make a very solid point to show that out here. And when it starts raining, all these humans are trying to jump on the ark as well. And the fallen angels themselves are stopping them. And this scene almost brings a tear to my eye every time I see it, because the humans start beating the fallen angels, and when the first one of them dies, his soul flies back up to heaven as he says, you know, forgive me. And all the other fallen angels say, you know, the Creator brings him home. And they start having a really fun time, because they know if they give it their all and do the right thing, they'll return to paradise and home again from this fallen world. And they end up saving the day, and Noah gets away. And I just kind of wanted to make this point that, you know, even after he goes through the chosen one journey, afterwards he has this problem with drunkenness. And they make this point of this moral choice of, you know, do you cover him in his shame, and, you know, just helping each other out instead of just standing there watching it happen and just letting people suffer unnecessarily. And I kind of want to talk about root causal factors, because I see Noah as a root causal factor, that you had to reset their reality because there was all this wickedness and evil, so it could kind of go back to innocence, because it all started with eating the fruit that brought in all this chaos that led to this eventual cataclysm. And I was watching that Comics Explained channel again that I was talking about in the last video with all the absolute Batman comics and all that, that there's this doctor in here talking about how they have to get to the root cause of the malady. And I've been wanting to include that because I've been talking about the new Mission Impossible movie a lot, and how he's against an AI entity that he can't really physically interact with, and that it's trying to take over the world. And the one way they can stop it is they have to find its original source code. And I have always seen that is you have to figure out the root causal factor of our reality to fix this problem that we're in. That we have to find the original sin or reason that this started going bad, and really understand this full system if we want to cure this disease or virus or chaos that we find ourselves in. And I was watching this funny medical video where he was saying, is there a rootier cause? Like, can we dig even deeper than what we thought it was? And back to human nature again. And it's funny, this meme sums up in one picture that says, do not climb and play around the pipe. And that's what everyone's doing. And that's so much of what human nature is, and where we find ourselves, that we're doing what we're not supposed to be doing, for the most part anyway. And how in that same comic it was talking about how everyone suffers, and that is part of the human condition, that It covers happiness and sadness and evil. And we also have to combine that with, the plan of the higher mind of God, but also our own free will and us trying to walk this spiritual path towards enlightenment and truth. And this idea of predestination or retrocausality. And I want to talk about the Loki show again, because the man at the end of time that we were talking about in the last episode makes a point to Loki to say, I paved the way. That every step that you took along this journey, or the synchronicities, like I had a hand in that to bring you right where we all are right now. And that he had his own versions throughout space and time. A lot kind of like Back to the Future again as well. Playing out his story that even though he's at the end of time, he's manipulating his past self in the very beginning to give himself this path to basically becoming a god, which I've been talking about in a lot of things like The Flash and things like that, that your future self is manipulating your past self, or like Attack on Titan that I've talked about before, and that how that has to do with recreating reality. And that's very similar to Severance, and your higher and lower self interacting on this hero's journey in saving the divine care and duality. And how in Severance, he was a macro data refiner, that he was connecting all these dots and working for this false light company because they couldn't do it themselves. They were vampires. So he had to connect the dots for the vampires, yet that was all a part of his hero's journey and finding out where the divine care was. And how the point of that, he knew he was being played like a fiddle, yet he had to keep going along step by step because that was part of the hero's journey anyway. And back to this meme about being played like a fiddle. And it's kind of a tangent right here, but while we're talking about like superpowers and making your imagination becoming true and like the observer effect over reality, I've talked about this a few episodes ago about how adrenaline can alter space and time, and that elite athletes can get in this zone where they're experiencing time differently than they normally would. And this allows them to have greater reaction time and be better at what they're doing, and how this affects time and space. And it has more effects. And in this Batman comic I was reading, how it further is connecting these dots, that these people right here have the part of their brain that protects them from exerting too much pressure on their muscles. And adrenaline can do the same thing, that when a mom sees her baby trapped under a car, she can lift the car because her muscles could always do that, but it was her mind stopping her muscles from doing that because that would cause her permanent harm in her day-to-day life. So without the adrenaline, it keeps you in a normal state. And how a lot of special needs people have very strong physical powers because they can unlock that part of their mind easier because they're so emotional, in my opinion anyway. And how these adrenaline rushes can basically give you our version of superpowers and slow down time itself. And I've talked about in this Japanese show that this vampire right here can use his willpower and mind to slow down time itself. And that the hero can do that as well, because he needs to learn to slow down time if others can do it as well. And that's the whole point of the Matrix. That's what Neo does. He slows down time so he can stop and dodge bullets, which is how he defeats evil in the first few movies. So, as we continue this hero's journey, I've been wanting to talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish for a long time. This is all about this idea of imagination becoming reality. And I kind of wanted to relate it that Puss in Boots is in the Shrek universe, and I believe I've talked about Shrek before. And in the first movie, he's saving the divine care from the evil dragon's lair, so the evil Kundalini. And in the second movie, it's about a fairy bringing wishes to life, and, be careful what you wish for. And in the fourth movie, he's sent to a false reality by Rumpelstiltskin in a wish he makes that he thinks will make things better. So it just keeps reverberating this idea. And in the beginning of one of these movies, in the credits, it has like this generative being as they're in this fairyland, and it's about this imagination coming to life. And that's the whole point of this movie right here with Puss in Boots. And it starts out by saying there's this star. He's wishing upon a star. And this story is a fairy tale. And I just wanted to relate it back to Barbie, that the whole point of that movie was that this fairy tale that you thought wasn't real was actually real somewhere. So once upon a time, a wishing star fell from the sky. And this is also the same plot as the movie It, the evil shape-shifting clown that falls from space that preys on children that lives in the sewer, fell from space as a red plasma thunderbird. And the same thing with The Thing. It came in a UFO and crashed in the ice. And the plot of Annihilation is this meteor crashes and starts warping reality around it and causing chaos. And the Nicolas Cage movie Color of Space, a meteor lands and starts causing all this chaos and starts mutating things almost the exact same way as Annihilation did. And it's very similar to the effect of this meteor falling on their world. And that's why I say it's not all bad. It's just I think if there's a good version, there's a bad version as well. And when it landed in the Great Woods, it scorched it black. And the Dark Forest was born. And there's a lot of fairy tales about the Dark Forest and wish granting. And that the wishing star, where it hit, all this new life started blooming from it. And there's a legend that you can unlock a single wish if you can get there. So the movie starts with Puss in Boots, where he's singing the song about himself and how he's this fearless hero that everybody loves. So he's the somebody. And as he's singing this song, he wakes up this giant. And while he's fighting this giant, he loses his 8th life. And he goes to the doctor and says, "Don't worry, I'm Puss in Boots and I laugh at death." And the doctor says, "This is your last life. And I would say no more adventures. Just live a normal life. Like, stop all this craziness." And he's not going to do it. Puss in Boots is like, "You're too good looking to retire." So he meets this wolf. And the wolf is talking about how he's this legend and all the parts of the legend. And he wants his autograph, but he has this wanted poster as he does it. And they start fighting over it because he thinks he's a bounty hunter. And Puss in Boots starts losing, which he never does. And the wolf says, "You're not living up to the legend. You're not living up to being the somebody." And Puss in Boots sees his life flash before his eyes and starts feeling all this fear, which he normally never does because he usually laughs at the face of death. So he drops his sword, and the wolf is saying, "Pick it up." And I just want to relate that to Excalibur, the sword of destiny that can bring your imagination to life, that I have entire episodes about. And he ends up escaping through the toilet, which is one of the least dignified things he can do, and is also related to the hero's journey, which I've talked about. And he ends up escaping, and he buries his old outfit, and he just tries to blend in and act like a normal cat. And he does that for a while. And I wanted to relate that to Samurai Jack, because he's the hero with the magic sword that's trying to defeat evil throughout space and time as well. And in the 5th season, they rebooted it that he lost his magical sword, and he grows this big mustache, and he's basically like a hobo. And the same thing happens to Puss in Boots. He becomes the nobody. And he finds this dog right here, this, Sirius, entering the story. And Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and bears have huge synchronicities in my life as well, break into the house where he's at, and they're looking for the legend of Puss in Boots. And they find the grave of it, like, oh, he's dead. He's not here anymore. He's gone. Like, the legend isn't here right now. Like, if you think of Jesus, you can't really point to him right now. That right now, the legend's gone. And the thing is, he comes back. It's a cyclical cycle. So Puss in Boots ends up digging back up his outfit, the legend, and right there, Sirius, right there, linking it to it. And how in Samurai Jack, I was just talking about, they link that to wolves. And I've gone deeper into this that I could probably list 5 or 10 heroes and superhero stories that link the superhero to wolves and Sirius and all that. But we'll just leave it at that. So they find this map to the star and how that's the key. And the Dark Forest has an actual plasma portal in it that sends them to this alternate reality. And in this alternate reality, the path follows their hearts. So when Puss in Boots puts his hand on the map, it changes their entire reality to like this hellscape. And there's basically 2 cats there. There's Puss in Boots and a female version of him, like the divine feminine. And hers is the abyss of eternal loneliness. So like both their maps suck and are of pain and sorrow and trauma. And the Sirius dog, who's also very traumatized, but he sees life in a positive light and rainbows and all that. So right here, like the field of quick and easy solutions, that their path in this world that's shaped off your imagination itself, that if you have a good vibration, it's a really easy, awesome time where you learn, but if you're not, it's like hell itself. So this villain that's following them has all these magical artifacts that he's abusing. Like he has this phoenix that he's using the wrong way and using it to burn down this forest. He's using his employees as a human bridge to walk across. And here he even has Excalibur, which we're just talking about, but he never got it out of the stone. So he's just this unawoken hero that's using all these magical artifacts like a vampire because he can't do it by himself. The same with all these employees. Like he needs all these people to bring him along because he can't go across the gap himself. So later on, Puss sees all of his past lives, but I almost see this as like multiversal versions of himself throughout space and time with those different personalities. And he says, you know what? You guys are jerks, and it's very conflicting for me, so I'm going to find my own way on my journey. And I just want to relate that to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, because he has all these multiversal versions of himself, yet he was purposefully left off to the side and doesn't vibe with all of them, and they see him as an anomaly. So it's kind of the same thing right here. Like he doesn't fit in with the other versions of himself because he's changed and he's walking this hero's journey. And the same thing is of Neo. He was known as the anomaly. And I kind of want to make a weird point here that Neo was also played like a fiddle. That the architect and I forget her name, the lady with the cookies, were working together to restart the Matrix cycle into a new one. And they needed the chosen one to do that. So Neo's choice to save this system wasn't as organic as he thought it was. It was playing him like a fiddle so they could just shove him back into the Matrix again so he could keep powering their world and being asleep in it. So it gets back to the wolf because he finds Puss again. And the wolf is saying that the smell of fear is intoxicating. And how he's talking about all these past lives that he's had. And that he's been there watching them the whole time. And that just brings me back to the man at the end of time saying, I paved the road. I've been watching this whole time, along the way. And at this point, the wolf reveals that he's death. And not in any fancy way, that he's straight up an incarnation of death. And at that point, Puss in Boots starts running like he's been the whole movie, and how it's related to this red plasma energy of death right here. So eventually they get to the end where the wishing star is with their map, and he has to face death itself. And when he finally stands up to it and he gets his sword of destiny back, and he isn't afraid anymore, death doesn't want to fight anymore. He's like, all right, I'll just wait till you die one day. Like, this isn't fun for me anymore. Like, it was only fun for me because you were afraid. And that's the same idea of it and the demonic clown in that. Once you stop fearing it, it lost all of its power over you. And that evil guy earlier comes back and he's trying to steal this wish from all of them. And I just wanted to make a point right here that this dog is not serious at all. And it's just this giant goofball, but he's what saves the day. And they all get their happily ever afters because of this goofy, serious dog and his wish coming true. And I just kind of wanted to say, that's a kid's movie, and it goes pretty deep into the idea of death, and a lot of people loved that dog villain and also, just back to it, you have a dog right here that represents the good, but you have a dog right here that represents death. It's two sides of the coin. So it's all your perceptions and your journey and what you're scared of. So this meme right here, you have this kid's version and being scared, but then of being an adult. And I always love down at the bottom, hey there, demons, it's me, ya boy. Or ghosts, like you're not afraid of the ghosts anymore. It's just like, hey ghosts, it's me. How you doing? You're not afraid of them anymore. But the reason I put this meme in here was that I talked about a kid's movie, and now I want to talk about an adult movie and the human condition, and how in the last video I talked about some dark things, and how this movie that I'm about to talk about also had these exact same things playing out, so I kind of wanted to lump that in because it was also in the human condition and the mainstream, and allows us to analyze a narrative structure that I find very interesting. So the movie Bone Tomahawk, and this holds a very special place in my heart just because it's a horror movie that it's not really a horror movie for a while, and it just tone shift is so crazy, and it just becomes this crazy brutal movie that comes out of nowhere almost and just subverts your expectations of what's happening and just shows you some really gnarly stuff. But I think all that gnarly stuff is in the human condition, and if we're bringing light to darkness, I'd like to talk about it. So at the beginning of this movie, this guy's wife gets taken by these evil Indians called troglodytes, and they bring in this expert Indian guy who's telling them they live in this ancient forbidden mountain range, and it misspelled it here, but it calls them people of the Valley of the Starving Men, and they're troglodytes, which basically means like monsters almost. Like, he makes a specific point that they're not human, not really. And it doesn't matter how many people they bring or how many of them there are, they don't have a chance. And the Indian guy's not going with them because he doesn't want to die. So he's just like explicitly warning them. But the sheriff's basically saying, like, we don't really have a choice. We have to go save the divine care, and we're going to go do it. And that made me think of Lord of the Rings because they didn't really have a choice either. They had to go figure out what to do with the ring if they wanted to save the world. So they had to form the fellowship and go save the world. So they end up going out looking for the divine care from these monsters, and they get there, and it just goes south really fast. Almost immediately. And there's not a lot of music in this movie, so they play with the tones. And it's just crazy how fast it happens. It happens in like 15 seconds. They go from being okay to like all of them are almost already dead because these dudes are monsters. They put sand and ash on themselves so they blend in with the desert. And they've cut out their vocal cords and they put animal bones in there and their faces as well. So like they don't speak. So they're almost like like humans that have become monsters. They're about as close as you can get to it. And they take everyone prisoner and they're like killing them in horrible ways. And this dude right here is the main character whose wife was stolen. Now, this entire time his leg's been broken, and he went anyway. And they kind of left him behind before they went in to go try to save her. Yet they failed. So he has to save the day, and he's the last person you would expect. And he's figuring it out. Like, he has blood on his lips because he has one of the animal bone whistles that he's using to, like, communicate. Like, he's figured out the enemy when no one else really did. And that's the whole point of a horror movie also, is that you don't know what your enemy is. It's a mystery to you. If you knew what they were, it'd be more of a thriller. It wouldn't really be a horror movie, because horror is something you don't fully understand. And that is what allows you to be afraid, because if you fully understood it, you probably wouldn't be afraid. And if you understand the evil, then you can figure out ways around it. And here's a little graphic part, but they also have amputees in this movie. That's what they did to their women. That they turned them just basically into immobile people that just had babies, so they could continue this monstrous tribe over and over and over again. And this was probably one of the first times I ever saw this in mass media. Like, it's really dark. And I saw this recently in the last couple months in the Dungeon Soup cartoon episodes I was talking about in the last episode, and how this really dark topic kind of once again reared its head in our consciousness. And also, like, the human centipede as well, and how that relates to, like, the Whore of Babylon and all this evil as well, and the movie Overlord and all this evil experimentation, and how this could be happening to, like, innocent people. And not just the darkness, but how we could redeem and save those people as well. And, you know, maybe not their souls, but you could give them some robot arms. That would help out on their spiritual journey, in my opinion. And something that I want to do one day, hopefully. And I also wanted to relate that idea back to the aliens. You know, these embodiment of evil and the abyss itself. And how they need real people to keep their horror show going. That two aliens can't really make another alien. That they need, or two vampires can't make another vampire. They need real human and innocence and light. And that moral generative force to keep their crazy evil circus going. And this horrible cycle happening over and over and over, but how this is the evil side of the human condition. And how we're all subject to it, that there are two sides of the coin, and how the unveiling or the apocalypse is all about bringing light to the darkness or the human condition. And how that's shadow work, in my opinion, or what's I've been led to believe is shadow work. You know, integrating that shadow and that fear and that evil and figuring out how to heal it so you can be a more complete being and move past it and continue your spiritual journey wherever that might lead. Hopefully one day back to the oneness in a good way. And how that meme relates to me, and I had this in the last presentation, and sorry if that's a bit heavy for those out there. Yet, I keep getting synchronicities and wanted to share it because I believe it's a part of it. And how in the beginning of the last presentation I was talking about what kind of train, what kind of ride and experience do you think this actually is? Where do you think we are right now and what this actually is? And what I want you all to ask, and what life keeps reverberating back to me, even if I want to have this innocent face and just look at the light, that the dark keeps coming back to say, hey, I'm a part of this story too. And we have to figure all this out for everybody because we're all one. And with that, I would like to end up the presentation in here and say thanks again for joining us on this crazy roller coaster and experience we call life. And as we move step by step and day by day and try to withstand all this crazy chaos so we can create a better picture and try to share it with each other. Or at least that's what I'm trying to do here. And hopefully that's your vibration as well, and we can build up from there. And I ask if you also like this idea of being more self-sufficient from this crazy system, that you also begin to think about it more and more in a positive way. One thing I've been trying to do more lately is every time I go to the grocery store is try to imagine what I would do to replicate all these things I'm buying in a moral way, and how I would do it with other moral individuals in a more self-sufficient way, further away from society, and how we could do that in peace and happiness, and how we can at least begin to mentally visualize these things, so hopefully that those seeds can sprout into fruit and plants that one day will actually give us that experience. So thanks for joining us, and sorry for all the stuttering, and hopefully next time it won't be too long. So day or night, wherever you are, peace.